Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Today we welcome back to the show Academy Award-winning composer Michael Giacchino. This is actually Michael's fifth appearance on Dolby Creator Talks, which I think wins him a prize. He was here previously along with director Matt Reeves to discuss their collaborations on War for the Planet of the Apes and again on The Batman. He joined us to talk about the movie he directed, Marvel's Werewolf by Night, and most recently he was here to talk about his score for the Fantastic Four: First Steps. It's always a pleasure to have Michael on our show. And here he is again to discuss his latest score for Spider-Man: Brand New Day with our regular guest host, music journalist John Burlingame. I'll let John take it from here.
Our guest today is one of our favorite composers. He's won an Oscar, an Emmy, 3 Grammys, and he's made larger-than-life subjects a specialty. Everything from The Incredibles to Star Trek and Jurassic World to The Batman. Today he's with us to discuss his music for the new Spider-Man movie, Brand New Day. Welcome, Michael Giacchino.
Hey, how are you doing, John? Good to be here.
Oh, it's great to see you again. You've, of course, done franchises before, including 3 Star Trek, 3 Star Treks, 3 Jurassic Worlds, but this is the first time you've done 4 movies in a series. And so I want to know, why did you decide to do Brand New Day?
Well, honestly, in the beginning, when they decided they were going to make another one, I was thinking, like, well, should I even do this? Do I have anything really left to say about this character and this world? So that was a real sort of worry in the back of my head. Even though I love Spider-Man, I wanted to do it, but it was that feeling of, should I do it? And so when Destin came on board for the project, I happened to be in London. I think I was recording for Fantastic Four, and he was in London as well. And he said, hey, do you want to get together and we can talk about the possibility of working together on Spider-Man? And I was like, sure, let me meet Destin and see how this goes. So I met Destin, and immediately I could tell he was zeroing in on the one thing that made me sort of was hoping would be a part of the movie, which was this idea of that Peter has nothing. Peter is now alone. He has no friends. All he has is his work. And that's how the movie opens. And I was like, that's where I want to go. I want to go there. I want to see what that feels like, to be Spider-Man, but with no one to share it with in the way that he was able to in the last films. And I thought that was really interesting. So I thought at that moment, I knew he was going to allow me to go into areas that we hadn't gone before. So it was really, really an immediate yes after meeting Destin. I was like, yes, okay, yes, I am going to do this, and I'm excited to do it. You know, I loved working with John Watts. John Watts built everything that this movie stands on, and this movie only works because of the job that John did on the previous films, which I thought he did a wonderful job, and I loved working with him. So it's nice to see this film sort of stand on the shoulders of the other 3 in a really good way.
And we should clarify that when you speak of Destin, you're talking about the director.
Yes. Destin Daniel Cretton. Yes.
Cretton. Okay.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Incredible guy.
So is it a challenge then to take something that you've written and in fact expanded 3 times into something that's sort of different emotionally? Because this film, I think anybody who's seen the film will agree, this film is deeper emotionally, I think.
Yes. Yeah, it goes to the core of what it means to be alone, really. And that's a really scary place to be. And it's not afraid to go there. It's not afraid to speak about that. And it's not afraid to talk about this idea that, being special also means that you could be an outcast. It doesn't always mean that it's going to bring good things into your life. It really means that it could bring a lot of negativity into your life. And that's hard to deal with at times. So I think for me, musically, it was, all right, do we abandon the theme that we had for 3 movies and just go with something brand new? So it felt like, okay, he's in a wholly new place. That was my first thought. But then the more I sort of tried to do that, I kept thinking, well, no, maybe it's not so much about inventing anything new, but it's about taking away from what we already have. So if I have a full melody written out, what notes can I pull out of that melody that would sort of represent the pieces of his life that have now gone away, right? What pins can I pull out and still have the melody sort of make sense, but not be as elegant or fulfilled or full as it used to be. And so that became the key to the whole thing, was like, oh, we have the Spider-Man theme, but let's take out this note, that note, that note, so that instead of dun, dun, da, da, dun, da, you just get dun, 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 and it's suddenly, it feels so lonely, but you recognize it right away as well as Spider-Man, because it's keeping the idea, but missing the filigree, if you will, everything in between. And that seemed to work really, really well. Once we started leaning into that, then it was like, all engines full ahead.
Did you start early, like you did, for example, on Fantastic Four, or did you wait to see footage and see how this was all playing out as a film?
I waited to see footage on this one. It was great to go in and see what he was thinking. I had ideas that I was playing with on the side just to see, but you always want to make sure those ideas line up with what the director's doing. For me, it's like, I try not to read scripts if I don't have to. A lot of times I will if someone wants comments or thoughts. But in general, I think it's better for me not to read the script before working on the movie, because if I read the script, I'm thinking of, okay, what version of this movie would I make? And then I have to sort of unwind all of that when I see the movie and go, oh, that's not what I was would have done, or what I thought, So it's just about everyone's different take. And I always want to try and keep myself in alignment with what the director is hoping to do with the story, as opposed to go in there and just elbow everyone out of the way and do my own version of what I think it should be. That's not what this job is. So.
And you use, I guess, as you often do, a traditional symphony orchestra, right?
Yeah. A big, like, 85-piece orchestra that we recorded at Abbey Road. And that's always going to be the backbone for this, because that gives you an emotion like you can't get in any other way. But at the same time, there's a lot of synth work in the movie, which I went much deeper into that world than I ever did in any of the other Spider-Man movies. And that was really fun because it gave an extra layer of complexity to Peter's character. These other things that, there is this thing bubbling up inside of Peter that he doesn't quite understand. And I wanted something to sort of represent that. And then, so the synths end up becoming that idea, like what's underneath the orchestra. If the orchestra is Peter Parker, the synths are something else creeping in to be a part of the fabric of who Peter Parker is. And how's that going to play out,
Are you referring to the physical changes that he's undergoing during the movie?
Yes, exactly. Uh-huh. There's something that he's dealing with inside. In the same way a teenager deals with puberty, there's something going on that is changing, and he doesn't quite understand what it is or why it's happening. And should he suppress it or should he embrace it? That's the question. And it's a very, it's something very relatable to all of us, I think, at different stages in our life. When we go through these changes, are they changes that we should suppress or are they changes that we embrace? And that's one of the things I loved about the story, was that it was completely, relatable in that way across generations.
I just want to go a little bit deeper into the synth side of things, because those were sounds that I didn't immediately recognize. And I thought, is he using old Moogs? Is he finding different sounds than we've heard before? What are we hearing when you rely on the electronics?
Well, it is a lot of Moogs. It's every basically vintage synth you can imagine, but I used virtual synths, soft synths, because I would have loved to have used all original gear, and we could have, but the problem is on a movie like this, it changes constantly. So to go back and then fix all of that music, it just wouldn't have been impossible. Schedule-wise, you just couldn't have done it. We would have had to go in and re-record all the synth stuff again, re-record. You just couldn't do that. So the best way to do it was to use really, really good soft synths. And but that also gave me a lot of control over how I wanted them to sound. So I was able to go in and adjust them exactly as I wanted them. And that way, when the film changed, I could easily make the adjustments with the music that I already had written. But believe me, if this movie had been made, in the 80s, that's what we would have had to do. That would have been, the only way to do it.
And it would have taken 2 more weeks.
Yeah, it really would have. And there were 2 more weeks that we didn't have. And they kept cutting, actually, and shortening the post schedule for this movie because it was down to the wire. This was not a leisurely film that was made. This was a movie that was made on a very, very tight schedule that only got shorter as it got closer to finishing. So, yeah.
And of course, the pressure always comes down on the composer, who's the last guy creatively.
The last guy, yes. It's like, okay, well, are we done yet? Come on, Mr. Composer, get all this music in here. Yeah, no, it was good. It never quite felt that way because I felt like all the departments were sort of in the same boat in terms of, okay, especially visual effects. They always, you think that music is the last guy on. Visual effects is usually the last man standing on these films, and they do incredible work under ridiculous timelines. So, yeah.
I want to speak for a few minutes about the villains.
Yeah.
The ones that we immediately recognize are people like the Hulk, who's not really a villain, but he's
right.
Like a colleague, but he,
sort of gets co-opted.
Yes, that's right. But there's also the Punisher and Scorpion.
Uh-huh.
And I'm wondering, did these guys need music of their own or a sound of their own?
Yeah. They like the Punisher has his own theme, and it's not like a real huge, epic, drawn out thing because there's not enough screen time for him really to do that. But he definitely has his own theme, which is a very direct sort of. It's action, but it's laced in tragedy as well. If you look at the chords that it uses, it has a weird sadness to it, even though it's always played in this really visceral sort of heart-pounding way. And I remember at one point saying to Destin, hey, maybe I should change this theme. He goes, no. I love how it feels sad. I love how there's something in there that feels, he goes, and that's good. That's who that character is. So he sort of pulled the reins on me from changing what I had, which I was grateful for, because sometimes you're so so deep in the weeds, you don't know what's what anymore. And then there's the Scorpion ended up having his own theme, which you hear pretty much in the beginning when he first shows up, and then when he's walking towards the helicopter, and then later when he shows up in the alley fight, in the street fight with Spidey, it shows itself there. But again, those are like I would say those are more motifs, that can be used because they aren't characters that have a huge sweeping moments in the movie.
And there is an especially powerful villain whom we don't see for the longest time, and without specifying who it is. Did this character need a specific sound or a musical?
Yes. This character had a very simple sound. And it's like, if you think of I wanted I don't want to say too much about this character, but if there was if you think of a wave, like a light beam. Think of it as a light beam. And if you turn the frequency up half a notch, it's going to create dissonance. And if you turn it down half a notch, it's also going to create dissonance. You're a half step off from where your light beam is. One note that goes up or down. And so the idea is that it centers around the center note, and then it rises up half a step, and then it lowers down 2 half steps. So you're always in this 3-note cluster for the theme. So it can be pure for a moment, but then it's going to give you this dissonance up and dissonance down. And for me, that was sort of simulating the vibrations in the way that this character is able to inhabit the world that they live in. Does that make sense? I know I'm dancing around this in a crazy way, but the idea that it is a simple theme. So it's about this repetitive nature of this idea that it's coming for you and it is relentless and it only does these 3 things and it doesn't care about anything else, you know? And then it's really fun to say, how do you turn that into something that is useful throughout an entire movie? Well, you have an entire orchestra to use it in a million different ways, plus the synths as well. And it became rather flexible over time. So it seemed to work, well for that sort of a thing.
What about Destin? I mean, you've spoken in a very positive way about him, and it sounds like the relationship was good. Did Destin have ideas that you found useful in terms of what music could do or should accomplish?
Well, most of the ideas he had came from our discussions about the emotions that we were trying to find, and really a lot of talk about, well, whose point of view are we reading the scene from? Because it can be scored any number of ways. And we want to make sure that the way we choose is the one that the audience needs in order to stay in the right story. So I think a lot of the discussions were about, Peter is seeing MJ, right? So this is clearly his point of view. This is what's going on. To MJ, he's nothing, just a nobody. I don't know who this kid is and whatever, doesn't care. But to Peter, that's his whole world, everything, the memories he carries with him are the memories he carries alone. No one else shares them anymore with him. So, I think a lot of our conversations were about that. Destin was also like, anytime I did go into the weird synth world, he was always like, yeah, I like that. I like that feeling. I like that you're doing that. And that's not often the case. A lot of times when I try and do that stuff, directors will be like, no, just the orchestra, and I'm always like wanting to find something where I can like get a little weirder and get a little more experimental in things. But, I guess you hire me for a specific thing. So,
to follow up a little bit more about the Peter and MJ thing, I mean, that's kind of in many ways the heart of the story. Yeah, there's a lot of action. There's villains here. There's lots of stuff that Peter's got that Spider-Man has to do. But the heart of the movie is really Peter's struggle with his feelings and the fact that, his closest friends don't even know who he is. That seems complicated to me.
Well, it is very complicated because you have musically. Yeah, well, you have a love theme for the two of them that was huge in the last movie. And in this movie, you can barely touch it because it doesn't belong anymore, And so it was more about hinting at that theme or using it in a very spare, simple way that sort of reflected Peter's loss of this relationship. And and again, she's not reciprocal in any of this, right? So it's really, it's hard to do. It's a hard thing, and you have to be very careful where and when you do it, because it could break a whole scene. It could make it feel untruthful. It could make it feel like not honest. There was never a moment for us to go big because of that, So again, it's just like an echo of the past. The theme is basically a fragment, a memory of what was, whereas in the last movie, it was just bam, in your face. These two are in love, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Let me ask you about the action scenes. I'm always interested in how a composer approaches action. There's a lot of very intense action material in this movie. And I sometimes wonder what the composer goes through in order to be appropriately powerful, maybe amping up the action, but by the same token, not repeating yourself 4 or 5 times over the course of a movie. Talk a little bit about how you approach that.
I like to find, for the action cues, I like to find little motifs and ideas that belong to that area, you know? So if you're building off of a particular idea, it can keep growing and growing and shifting, and then it's its own piece of music. So that little idea won't be used anywhere else, you know? So that's sort of how you sort of isolate these things and give each one its own thematic identity, so to speak. And it's not like you're giving it a theme like the Spider-Man theme, but you're giving it little ideas, you know, and it could be in the form of an ostinato and how that works. It could be in the form of a little motif that bounces around in different ways. You know, whenever the villain is sort of in action doing what the villain does, there's a particular motor that happens, you know, representing. So that is something that sort of shows up. So you're dressing these things up in costumes, sort of, so to speak, and some of the costumes will return, and some of them won't. You know, they're wearing the robe again. That means that this is going to be a, you know, it's that sort of an idea. And action cues, you're always ultimately tied to what's happening on screen. So it's not like you can just blanket do a whole new great fun piece of music. You need to follow that. So it's instinctual, it's storytelling, it's just me following what's happening in the moment and making sure that I'm trying to be in alignment with the right emotional undertones of each step of the way of that action scene. Just like you would in a scene with two people just talking about a lost love or something, you know, you want to make sure you hit the moments in the right way.
Talk a little bit about Abbey Road for a second. I mean, I love the fact that you mentioned it and that you had a huge London orchestra. Was there anything about the recording sessions that was especially fun or exciting or unusual or unexpected?
Well, one thing that was very helpful, which was great, was Destin, who was in LA at the time, you know, continuing editorial. He wasn't able to come out for the sessions. But to his credit, he got up at 4 a.m. every day and was on Zoom for the session so that he could be there for the entire day with me, which was so great because he and I would come up with ideas together. We could change things right on the spot. And that's the best way to do it, as opposed to me just in a vacuum going and recording it, bringing him back and him going, oh, I wish we could have done this, or we could have moved this that way. You know, that becomes difficult. Having the person there is always the best version of it. So I give him a lot of credit for getting up early for an entire week, 7 days we recorded. And he was up at the studio over at Disney at, early in the morning. So that was great. Having him there. In terms of, Abbey Road is just a really beautiful stage. It's one of my favorite stages to record in. And beyond just the incredible Beatles history of it all and everything else, Elgar played there, and they did radio broadcasts in that very room we recorded in. So that's pretty cool too. So it's got an incredible history. And when you walk in, you sort of feel taken care of by that history. That's a really interesting feeling, And I've recorded there so much over the years. It's, that's like an old home for me. I do love it.
Let me ask you about Marvel movies in general, because your history with Marvel dates back at least a decade to Doctor Strange. And of course, you've also done work on Thor and the Fantastic Four. Mm-hmm. What is it about these movies that that is appealing to you, either for musical opportunities or maybe for just storytelling?
Well, what's interesting is when they were starting out, right, and just getting going, and they were doing Captain America, Kevin called and said, "Hey, would you be interested?" And so I went and met on Captain America, and I ultimately ended up not doing it. There was other movies going on in my, going on at the time, and it was going to be too difficult. But I had to say no, and it's one of the regrets of my life is not having done that movie, because I really liked it, and I like Joe Johnston, and I think that he did a cool job with the movie. And there's not many regrets I have about saying no to things. That was one of them. And then later they asked about the Avengers, and I to me at the time, it looked like the kind of movie that might, like, with so many characters, that I don't know if I was ready for that. I didn't know quite what to do with it. So I said no to that. And then when Kevin came to me and said, "Hey,"
and we should say Kevin meaning Kevin Feige.
Kevin Feige, head of Marvel Studios. Yes. Right. When he came to me and said, "Hey, what about Doctor Strange?" And I was like, yes, 100% yes. Because that was a story about a singular person. It wasn't like an all-star person in the lineup of superheroes. It was one that I loved as a kid. I have Doctor Strange comics still from when I was a kid that I found in different flea markets. I used to get my comics from flea markets because I couldn't afford to go to the 7-Eleven and get them all the time, the new ones. So I would get the old ones. I'd go with my mom to the Columbus Mart in New Jersey, and on Thursdays during the summer. And that's where I would get my, like a whole stack of them for nothing, And in that stack would be Werewolf by Night, would be Doctor Strange, and all the weird stuff that, normally it's harder to find. So, and I really like the stories that center on a particular person or a character with an issue. And I felt like, okay, yeah, I can get in there and do that. So I did Doctor Strange. So when I was starting Doctor Strange, Kevin said, "How do you feel about Spider-Man?" And I was just like, yes, another one, 100% yes, because it's just a singular person who's got this issue. And it was before it was going to be introduced into all the other Marvel movies with, and I thought, okay, that feels like something I can do as well.
And also, interestingly enough, both Doctor Strange and Spider-Man created by the great artist Steve Ditko.
Yeah, exactly.
Who had a very unique style.
Really amazing style. Yes, incredible. So unique beyond what was being done at the time, and had a very sort of like psychedelic side to him, which I guess makes sense in the time that those things were made, but they over time made them even more special because of that, and I think that's why he's so celebrated. But certainly, yeah. So then it became easing my way into all of this and then Spider-Man sort of grew into the bigger universe that it was. And then, by the time Fantastic Four rolled around, I was like, yeah, I can handle something with 4 more characters. I can do that now. Now I feel like I got my feet wet. Sure, why not? But in the beginning, it was really about just the focus and feeling like I wanted to make sure whatever I was doing was something that I could lean in 100% and not have to rely on other things that have already been created around it.
To bring this back to Brand New Day, was there one especially difficult aspect of it, whether it was a scene or a character or an overall feeling? What was the most challenging part of the job?
I think the most challenging part of the job was tracking the emotional spine of the movie to make sure that we weren't pushing too hard and we weren't not pushing enough, and that calibration is something that more than most movies was really difficult on this one, because it was about such a emotional thing. We could fully lean into the emotional thing, but maybe that wasn't good all the time. You didn't want it to be like a depressing Spider-Man movies, and I think a lot of the first round of stuff was maybe taking it in too sad a direction, So it was about, all right, let's look at this again. And until you see it all end to end, you really never know. So it was about doing that, checking it, looking at it end to end and going, oh yeah, this is feeling too down here. So we need to kind of, let's alter this and maybe somehow alter the mood up a bit, so that we can start balancing out. It's really all about, if the whole movie is based on faders on a mixing board, like up and down, just calibrating all of those things. And you're constantly doing that. It's such a pain, but you have to do it to make sure, when you're done writing a cue, you're not done writing a cue. You're done for now writing that cue. But until you really kind of are able to see it all end to end, that's how you'll never know.
And were you bouncing ideas or musical cues?
Yeah. There were certain times I would do, even for my own, just curiosity, like 3-4 versions of something just to see what it was. Or I'd hand something in and then I'd be like, wait, don't look at that. I'm redoing it, So there were, and there were times we had like maybe 2 to 3 versions of a score of a cue that we recorded, because we wanted to be able to then have the option to go back and go, okay, which one in the lineup of the emotional story, which one's going to fit best into those slots. So it was really nice to have a couple of options coming back from London that allowed us to calibrate. Because usually if you just do one of each, the calibration is hard. Then you try, and then you start stealing from other parts of the movie to try and calibrate it better, and it doesn't, it's hard to do that.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the role, if any, that Dolby sound plays in your recording or mixing process?
Well, Peter Cobbin and Kirsty Whaley, who recorded the film, they record for every possible any possibility, whatever it is. And so they have microphones all over the place, and they are very much in tune with what the whole Dolby thing is and how that's going to work and what the best microphone lineup is going to be, and delivering that to the mixers in a way so that they can easily access that for whatever they want to do in terms of whether that's spatial movement, whatever it is, they have everything. So that is an area where Warren Brown, Peter, and Kirsty really kind of dig in and make it work. And Warren he does all the final mixes on the music for the film, and Pete and Kirsty recorded everything. So they captured it, and we were doing this daily. They would capture it that night, send everything we recorded to Warren, and by the next day, Warren would have like rough mixes back so that we could look. So it was like this, we were recording, mixing, listening, recording, mixing, listening. It was just like this hamster wheel during the entire week of recording, because again, the schedule was so tight, we had to get things to the dub stage. Yeah,
because don't you usually take a week or two after you record to mix everything?
And I can't tell you the last time we've been able to do that, because the schedules have gotten so crazy that you're ending up just feeding the dub stage as you're going. So yeah, it used to be the kind of thing where I remember spending 2 weeks mixing The Incredibles, Of course, we also recorded that to tape. So we had like 3 24 tracks lined up. So you needed 2 weeks.
In the Stone Age.
Yes, exactly. But you did used to have this buffer where you go, okay, we record it, now we're going to mix. And so Dan Wallen and I would sit on the mixing stage at Warner Brothers for a week, mixing all the cues for Ratatouille, whatever it was. And you had that time. Now you really don't, So now if you're updating after they've already mixed it into the film. You're going, I think we need to fix this mix. And it's sort of a backwards kind of a thing, and a little crazier these days.
Wow. Well, it's like the pressure never ceases, it seems like,
No, it just increases.
Well, Michael, thank you for spending some time with us today to talk about Spider-Man: Brand New Day. As we know, this is going to be a very big movie.
And I hope so. I hope people like it.
Music is a part of it.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's really great. Like the other night at the premiere, to finally sit with a big audience and just watch the movie and hear the reaction, and that's all you hope for, is that people can go into the theater, forget the world for a couple of hours, and just embrace having fun and enjoying something. And that's really all I hope they get, to come out of this, is it's a bright spot in people's lives for some moment of time. So let's hope that that's what it is, and we'll see how it does.
Well, again, thanks, Michael, for being with us today.
You're so welcome. Good to see you.
Many thanks to Michael for joining us once again on the show today, and thanks to John Burlingame for conducting yet another excellent interview. And an extra special thanks to our friends at Sony and Columbia Pictures for helping us put this conversation together. Be sure to check out Spider-Man Brand New Day, now in theaters in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos where available. We will have links, as always, in our show notes. And if you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, be sure you are subscribed to us here at Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Kahn. Thanks for joining us.